From your local election headquarters, an ABC4 News Town Hall Special, America in Crisis, a positive path forward.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight for this special presentation of ABC4 News. I'm Glenn Mills. Amid the pandemic and protests, we're exploring a positive path forward for an America in crisis. Tonight, we're joined by Utah Senator Mike Lee. Senator Lee, great to have you on the show. Thanks for being with us tonight.
Thank you, Glenn. It's good to be with you.
Good to be with you as well. We want to begin with the question, moving forward, this is on many people's minds. How will you help people who have been devastated financially by this pandemic? Let's start with a potentially second round of stimulus checks based on the same criteria as last time. Would you be in favor of that?
Well, I think what the American people and the people of Utah need now more than ever is the freedom to earn a living, to do what they do best, and not necessarily another check printed by the government based on money that's been borrowed from future generations. Utahns are overwhelmingly ready to get back to work. And we still need to monitor hospitalizations and the spread of the virus to make sure that we keep testing and so that we know what's happening. But the Utah economy really needs to get Utahns working again. There's no substitute for that.
No doubt about it. We have seen tens of thousands of Utahns lose their job, millions of Americans across the country in that very same boat. And it appears at this point the coronavirus is not going away anytime soon. So with that in mind, as the senator from Utah, what can you do? What steps can Congress take to help get Americans and Utahns back to work?
Well, I think there are a lot of things that we can do, including the fact that we need to help our charitable organizations. I see there being really three layers to our social safety net in this country. The first level consists of the family. The second level consists of charitable organizations. The third level consists of government. If you take out any one of those three legs of that stool, you're going to have problems. Our charitable organizations in our country and throughout Utah are going through an especially difficult time right now. First, because those who are serving the most vulnerable populations in our state are seeing increased demand for their services. And this is happening at the exact same time when those who are ordinarily the ones who fund those organizations are not donating as rapidly. And we've also at the same time seen that the virus itself has disrupted the way that many of these organizations deliver their services to those that they're designed to help. Congress can help here in a very real and meaningful and immediately tangible way by allowing all taxpayers to claim a greater portion of their charitable deductions for tax years 2019 and 2020. This would help more Americans donate to charitable organizations, and in particular, I think would bring a lot more revenue really quickly into those charitable organizations that deliver goods and services to those who are most vulnerable, most in need, and most affected by poverty.
Yeah, I know you recently participated in a conference call with local nonprofits here in the state of Utah. A couple follow-up questions there. Our latest tax reform, we saw the standard deduction kind of shift things up as well in regards to donations to charity. So what type of figure are you looking at here being allowed to write more off as far as charitable donations go?
Yeah, we want to increase what people can contribute and allow them to contribute it above the line, meaning for those who make too little money to qualify for itemized deductions. They're currently getting almost no benefit. In the last round, we allowed them to claim up to $300 in above-the-line charitable contributions for those who are utilizing the standard deduction. We want to expand that rather dramatically and make it deductible above the line up to 1/3 of the total standard deduction. We think that would really go a long way. We've got a pretty broad-based bipartisan group of support behind this. I'm one of 6 senators, 3 Republicans and 3 Democrats, who are spearheading this issue, and it's gaining a lot of momentum.
Okay, Senator, real quick, our time's running out in this segment. We'll have you back for a few more, but first, we've met with local businesses here in the state of Utah that have had to shut down for good due to this COVID pandemic, and others are worried they're going to have to do the same thing. Are you concerned about the way the economy might look even once we get things up and going again?
Oh, of course. Very, very concerned. We've gone through an unprecedented period of time in which we've had to see our state's economy and our entire nation's economy slow down dramatically over the course of a couple of months. And that sort of thing doesn't happen without leaving a very serious mark. It's one of the reasons why we've got to be more cautious now than ever about government intrusions into the economy. One of the reasons why we've got to provide regulatory and taxation alleviation to those who are affected by it. Keeping in mind, Glenn, that the biggest impact that our regulatory system and our taxation system have, even in areas where they appear to be getting only at those who are large corporations or wealthy individuals, all of that gets passed downstream. It ends up being paid for by poor middle class Americans in the form of higher prices on goods and services, diminished wages, unemployment, and underemployment. We're very concerned about this.
Okay, Senator Lee, stay with us. We'll be right back. Still ahead, images of hardship all over the country. To pay for the pandemic response, the U.S. government has spent trillions. What it means for the country's financial future and the national debt.
You're watching your local election headquarters. An ABC4 News Town Hall Special, America in Crisis, a positive path forward.
Welcome back to America in Crisis, a positive path forward. The U.S. has spent trillions on the pandemic response and multiple relief packages, but the crisis is not over yet. So should lowering the national debt still be a priority for lawmakers? Utah Senator Mike Lee joining me once again to discuss what the country's financial future could look like. Senator, let's dig right into that. $25 trillion and growing at its amount most of us can't even comprehend. We have added to that through stimulus checks and helping our local businesses out throughout the country. Is that an appropriate way to add to the national debt at this moment in time?
I don't think anyone doubts, Glenn, that in a circumstance amounting to a crisis, it might be appropriate for the government to spend more than it would otherwise spend for a short period of time. But I think that's important to remember, is that after that initial phase is over, we can't make this the new normal. We can't go around spending in $2.5 trillion increments on a regular basis. This simply isn't sustainable. In the longer haul, I think we've got to make more out of less. We've got to make do by not spending as much through the federal government. Among other things, I think we've got to look for ways to bring down some of the costs that government faces, including through things like healthcare. Our long-term mandatory spending isn't affordable, it's not sustainable. And if we don't get a handle on it now, it's going to end up harming America's poor and middle class more than anyone else. So,
Senator, this is a conversation you and I have had in the past, and we've had this very same conversation with these words spoken. We've heard the president talk about chipping away at this. Almost, most people in Utah want to see this chipped away. So what are additional specifics that we can start doing to where we can actually start to see it go down as opposed to continuing to skyrocket like it is now?
Look, Glenn, my biggest concern right now is to not add to it more, than we absolutely have to. We're going to be experiencing an absolutely unprecedented national deficit this year. So as far as chipping away at it goes, that's not going to happen this year, certainly. It's not going to happen anytime in the near foreseeable future. The best we can hope for right now is to keep it from increasing any further than it has, and then making sure that our economy grows faster than the rate of growth of government spending. Once we get to that inflection point, and if we can hold to that, we can whittle our national debt over time down to a point where it's manageable and where we could eventually pay it off. It's never going to occur as a result solely of cuts to government spending, nor is this something that can be done overnight.
So what would be a realistic time frame to start getting that in check and moving in the opposite direction?
Yeah. Anytime Congress looks at these issues, it tends to look over a 10-year budgetary horizon. When it measures the impact of changes to tax laws, entitlement laws, or any other significant any other government program or legislative change is going to alter the amount of money going in or going out, we tend to look at the 10-year budgetary window. And I think that's a reasonable window within which to address it. I've also said for a long time, one of the things that I think we need is to enact a constitutional amendment that makes it more difficult for Congress to expand the size of the debt. And that the only way you could overcome that would be through a 2/3 supermajority vote in both houses of Congress. My version of that constitutional amendment, once it took effect, would take 5 years to where it would fully kick in. It would probably take, at a minimum, 2, 3, 4 years in order for something like that to get ratified by the states. So you'd be looking at about a 10-year window anyway.
All right, that does it for our conversation on the debt. We're going to have more with the senator coming up. We're going to take a closer look at how the government has responded to the pandemic and how Senator Lee hopes to shape that response going forward. That's next. Stay with us.
You're watching your local election headquarters, an ABC4 News Town Hall Special, America in Crisis, a positive path forward.
Welcome back to our special, America in Crisis, a positive path forward. Senator Mike Lee back with me now as we shift our discussion to the government's response to the pandemic. Senator Lee, as you take a look now that we can look back, let's talk about your thoughts on how the government responded. Let's start with the president. How would you rate the job he has done in responding to this pandemic?
I think the president has responded well, and I think he responded well, especially when you take into account the fact that he deferred, as was appropriate in most circumstances, to state and local government authorities to make most of the decisions. He made decisions primarily with respect to things that were within the purview of the federal government. Beyond that, most of what he did was hortatory in nature. It was by way of a recommendation. And he made certain decisions with regard to international travel and policies in and uniquely affecting the federal government. So I give him an A on that. And I believe most of the difficult decisions that had to be made were made at the state and local level.
I heard the president at the beginning of this try to blow it off a bit as a Democratic or fake news conspiracy theory, basically. Do you think we lost any time in the beginning based on that type of sentiment?
Well, I think a lot of people throughout the country weren't quite sure what to think of it. And most people I know at one point or another went from thinking that the country wasn't taking it seriously enough to perhaps hyper-focusing on it too much. The president is a human being, and the president, like so many people, I think, wasn't quite sure at the outset where it would lead. But as far as whether that cost us any valuable time, he didn't waste any time. In fact, he went way ahead of where Joe Biden and many Democratic leaders thought was appropriate with regard to international travel. I'm not sure he could have acted much earlier than he did in the areas where federal action was necessary and appropriate.
Okay, Senator Lee, we solicited questions from our viewers for part of this special. I want to get to some of those now. This is from Daniel Whitty. He asks, if a coronavirus vaccine should be developed and approved, there will surely be a large number of people who do not trust it. Do you think it is constitutional to forcibly administer a coronavirus vaccination to those who do not want it?
I'd be highly skeptical of such an effort. And let me say this at the outset. Daniel's question presupposes a world that I think many of us would be very pleased to face, meaning a world where we have a vaccine. That vaccine, if made widely available, would be made widely available only if certain standards of safety and efficacy were met. And once those standards are met and people tend to accept those on a widespread basis, they're going to want to get them. There would be very, very few people, relatively speaking, who would not be rushing as quickly as they could to get to such a vaccine.
Okay.
This doesn't seem to me to be the kind of circumstance where we would want or need to even ask the question of whether to make it mandatory.
Here's another viewer question. This one comes from Marin Rose. Would we ever go back to a red lockdown, and what would cause it? What are your thoughts? Can you ever see going back to a lockdown as a result of this?
In response to the coronavirus, no. I'd be very skeptical, certainly, of another government-driven lockdown. As I've mentioned before, that there is a real public health cost to forcing people to stay in their homes. In other words, it's not a simple binary choice between, on the one hand, protecting lives and on the other, protecting the economy. There are very significant costs in terms of quality of life and even preservation of human life to telling people they've got to stay home. When you do that, we've seen, and recent statistical data support the conclusion, that people avoid getting necessary treatment for things like cancer, even cases of people going in for treatment for acute appendicitis were way, way down. You had hospitals that had never seen a slowdown quite like that before. And the interesting thing to remember here, Glenn, is the human body didn't change. Human physiology didn't change such that appendices no longer rupture or require surgery or removal. Nor did the human body stop needing treatment for things like cancer. But people stopped seeking treatment because of the fact that they were put in this lockdown position. It's not at all clear to me that by going into another lockdown mode, we wouldn't lose more lives than we would save.
All right, Senator, stay with us. We have one more segment with you. Utah's next governor will have to lead the state during a pandemic. Senator Mike Lee weighs in on the race for governor and who he thinks is best for the job. Stay with us.
You're watching your local election headquarters, an ABC4 News Town Hall Special, America in Crisis, a positive path forward.
Primary Election Day is next Tuesday, and the big race is the Republican primary for governor. Whoever wins will be the heavy favorite moving into November. We do conclude with Senator Mike Lee and getting his thoughts on this race. Senator, you broke tradition and came out and endorsed someone in this race, that being Jon Huntsman Jr. I'm sure our viewers have probably seen the commercial. Why did you decide to do that?
Look, for the same reason that if you were assembling a basketball team and you had the chance to select Michael Jordan at the peak of his career as part of your team, you would do it. Jon Huntsman is a virtuoso of statesmanship. He's someone with a proven track record. He's someone who, having been around the world and served as the U.S. ambassador to China and Russia in the last decade alone, has seen the bad things that happen as a result of the excessive use of government force. As a result of these and other experiences he's had, he knows better than anyone I can imagine how best we could position Utah to take its rightful place in the world economy over the next decade. He's the man to do it.
You somewhat unwittingly got dragged into this race. I want to get your thoughts on that. Governor Herbert met with Thomas Wright, one of the other candidates in the race, asked him to get out of the race and implied support down the road for potentially a matchup against you. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, you know, Glenn, I've found this a little perplexing. I've long considered Gary Herbert a friend, and I've still never had an adequate explanation provided to me as to what my race in 2022 has to do with the gubernatorial race in 2020. But even more surprising, Glenn, I am surprised that I haven't gotten a phone call from Governor Herbert explaining what actually happened in the call. I would like to know. I didn't bring myself into this conversation, never expected it to arise, never wanted it to arise, but now that it's arisen, I would hope and expect that he would provide an explanation to the public.
Well, do you draw any conclusion to the fact
in the conversation?
Do you draw any conclusion to the fact that he hasn't reached out to you?
It makes me wonder why. And it also makes me wonder why I haven't seen Spencer Cox publicly disassociating himself from any such conversation or publicly decrying the fact that it happened, if in fact it happened. So I would like to know what happened in the conversation. I'm surprised that I don't know. I'm even more surprised that Spencer Cox hasn't publicly condemned that type of heavy-handed behavior.
In Utah, it's illegal to ask someone to get out of a race and promise them something down the road. The governor has been emphatic in saying he did not do anything illegal. Do you think he did?
I don't have any basis upon which to speculate about what may have happened when I know nothing about the conversation. So I'm not going to try to offer speculation about what legal implications it might have when I know nothing about the conversation. And here again, I would like to hear from the governor on it. And I think the people of Utah deserve to hear both from Governor Herbert and from Lieutenant Governor Cox about who knew what, when they knew it, and whether Spencer Cox would support this kind of heavy-handed tactic.
Thomas Wright, when asked about it, said he felt it was inappropriate and something he would not do if he were governor. Do you believe it's inappropriate?
I would like to refer that question to Governor Herbert. Thomas Wright, who I like and for whom I have tremendous respect, has handled this with grace and aplomb. He's handled it with great class. He has answered the question. He's provided his analysis. He has said that he found it inappropriate. I would like very much to know whether Governor Herbert feels the same and how he responds to Thomas Wright's suggestion that it was inappropriate.
I've seen some of your social media posts on endorsing Governor Huntsman, and some people have lashed out saying that he's not the conservative that you should be backing. What's your response to that?
Well, he is. He's a born-again small L libertarian. He is also a committed conservative. That is not to say that he and I always agree on every issue all the time. Even my own wife doesn't necessarily agree with me on every issue all the time. But I've worked for this man. I've regarded him as a friend, as a mentor, and he's been my boss. I was his general counsel during his first term of office. And I have nothing but tremendous respect for his intellectual capacity, for his ability as a statesman, for his ability to lead, and for his ability to have a vision for our state and how to make it better.
Okay,
so
Senator.
look, I understand that some people may not agree with me on this or other decisions, and it wouldn't be worth doing if I didn't believe there weren't an opportunity to persuade people.
Okay.
And that's why I made the endorsement. I support him wholeheartedly.
We're going to have to end it on that note. Thanks for your time tonight. We appreciate it. And thank you for joining us for this special edition of ABC4 News. We hope to see you again tonight at 10.